Also charge a parent who left a gun unattended. Who, violated the safe storage law that I was just discussing. But the burden of proof in a case like that is really high, and it can be difficult to prove that the parent did something illegal. So in this case, no adult was criminally accused of wrongdoing.
What a story. WNYC Samantha Max, and a tragedy here. Sam, thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
WNYC supporters include Ava, The Secret Conversations. Downton Abbey's Elizabeth McGovern takes the stage as Ava Gardner. A look back at the golden age of cinema with Mickey Rooney and Frank Sinatra starts July 29th. Tickets at avagardnerplay.com.
New York's got one of the most complicated transportation systems in the world. From flying into Newark Liberty to changing at Jamaica, being a New York commuter isn't for the faint of heart. It's why we launched On the Way. Each week, reporters Stephen Nesson, Clayton Guza, and me, Remzi Khalife, take a look at the how and the why of how New Yorkers get around. The latest transportation news, thoughtful examinations, and we'll even take your transit questions. Catch On the Way, Thursdays on All Things Considered, and in your inbox at wnyc.org/newsletters.
Marketplace Morning Report is coming up next, and then in 10 minutes at 9 o'clock, it's the BBC NewsHour on WNYC. Let's check in with London and see what they're working on. Hello, London.
Good morning, WNYC. I'm Rob Young. On today's NewsHour, after Israeli airstrikes hit Damascus, Syria has begun pulling troops from the Druze majority province of Sweda. That's BBC NewsHour coming up at 9 on WNYC.
77 and partly sunny now. We have a heat advisory again today. We also have a chance of some late morning and some mid-afternoon showers. Partly sunny, 92 for a high temperature as of now, but feeling closer to 98 with that humidity. Warm winds gusting as high as 25 miles an hour. We'll begin a slight cool-off tomorrow. Mostly sunny, 84 with winds gusting to 20 miles an hour. It's 8:52.
The President versus the Fed Chair.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Progressive Insurance. Progressive is looking for individuals who want to join an inclusive and unique culture. More information, including application, at progressive.com/careers.
From Marketplace, I'm Sabri Benishore, in for David Brancaccio. President Trump wants Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell to cut interest rates. But the Fed makes that call based on analyzing the economy, not a president's wishes. This has some concern the president is looking for an excuse to fire Powell, and that could come from costly renovations at the Fed's D.C. headquarters. The Fed's supposed to respond to a letter from the White House's Office of Management and Budget questioning these renovations. Trump says he's discussed the idea of firing Powell, but says it's highly unlikely. Marketplace's Nancy Marshall-Genzer has that.
The letter gives Powell until July 21st to respond to a series of questions about cost overruns in the nearly $2.5 billion renovation. The Fed says the buildings in question haven't been renovated since the 1930s. Former Fed historian Gary Richardson can attest to that.
The bathrooms down in the basement near the library are really kind of scary.
Richardson says the water in the sinks was scalding, and the buildings were not very accessible for people with limited mobility. The Fed blames the higher price tag on asbestos and contaminated soil removal and says the water table is higher than expected. Former Fed attorney Cornelius Hurley is among the central bank watchers who think the renovation is a pretext to fire Powell.
I think it's a weak case, and I think Powell will challenge it.
Hurley says President Trump should worry about how markets will react if he does terminate the chair. He should also think about whether such a move would get him what he wants, because the chairman of the Fed board is only one of 12 members of the Federal Open Market Committee, which actually sets interest rates, and considers itself, Hurley says, the Fed's establishment.
If Trump were to alienate the establishment could exact its own punishment.
In other words, even if Trump succeeds in replacing Powell, he might not get the lower interest rates he wants. I'm Nancy Marshall-Genzer for Marketplace.
When a U.S. business is faced with a tariff, it has some options. It can pass that cost on to consumers, it can try and eat it, or it can ask suppliers if they can absorb some of it too. A little known economic indicator out this morning is shedding light on just who exactly is paying for the tariffs. It's called the Import Price Index. Marketplace's Justin Ho has that.
The Import Price Index measures prices when imports arrive at the border, says Megan Schoenberger, senior economist with KPMG.
And so it happens before there are any taxes and fees applied to it through customs.
Schoenberger says that can tell us how tariff costs are shared. That's because a foreign company that exports to the U.S. might decide to lower its prices if it's worried that tariffs will make its products too expensive.
The foreign exporter doesn't want to lose their whole market, so maybe they start discounting.
But Schoenberger says that hasn't really been happening recently. Import prices actually rose a little in April and May. Jason Miller, a professor at Michigan State University, says the price of certain imports, from China for instance, have fallen some.
But when you look, especially if we focus on, items from China, the overall increase in tariffs has been far, far, far larger.
Which means foreign exporters aren't absorbing much of the tariffs at all. American importers are. Miller says that's why the import price index can be an early indicator.
Because if we're not seeing substantial declines in that, then we know, okay, if there's a 10% tariff on these goods coming from Europe, that's telling me that U.S. importers are paying more.
Which means businesses and consumers will too. I'm Justin Ho for Marketplace.
Pre-tariff import prices in June actually went up 0.1%. Does not sound like foreign suppliers are offering discounts to help pay for tariffs. All right, let's do the numbers. Dow futures down 0.2%. S&P futures up less than 0.1%. NASDAQ futures up 0.1%.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Odoo, dedicated to providing software designed to scale with businesses. Odoo's programs for manufacturing, accounting, and more aim to provide building blocks for creating a custom software suite. Odoo, what businesses need. And by Affinity, provider of the CRM for the private capital relationship economy. Affinity knows who has the best relationship with the right startup. Affinity.co/marketplace.
United Airlines and Delta reported this week that business is stabilizing after a slow start to the summer, but there is still a chance of turbulence. Marketplace's Nova Safo explains.
Summer is usually go time for the travel industry, and yet prices are down about 3% compared to a year ago. And if you want to know why, Nora Murphy can tell you. She owns and operates 4 Airbnb listings in Jersey City.
People usually come to Jersey City, not because it's so lovely, which it is, but also because it's proximity to get to Manhattan.
It's right across the river. Murphy's properties would normally be packed right now with mostly European travelers, but she's only half full.
There were guests who had already scheduled, but they are calling and canceling because they are afraid to be detained at the airports.
And it's not just international travelers who are pulling back.
1 in 5 Americans have planned less or plan to travel less going forward.
Jeremy Goldman is an analyst at eMarketer.
And more than half of Americans report that the current economic conditions, like tariffs, like rising prices, have indeed affected their travel plans for the year.
So foreign travelers and Americans, a double whammy. Economist Shannon Grein of Wells Fargo sees all of this as part of a bigger pattern, a pullback in discretionary services spending.
Things like eating out, travel, personal, professional care services, things that maybe we don't need to prioritize.
And things that are sensitive to how consumers are feeling.
They don't care that inflation's down compared to last year. They're worried about the fact that it's going to go higher and that it's still higher than what they remember pre-COVID. So when you throw tariffs on top of that, I think it's really easy to understand why consumers are more pessimistic.
And many are in a wait-and-see mode. Just ask Nora Murphy, our Airbnb host in Jersey City.
Normally at this time, my October, November, and December, those are our biggest times. Those would be all booked by now, but I do not have a single booking for those right now.
Murphy is expecting this entire year to be slow. I'm Nova Safo for Marketplace.
And in New York, I'm Sabri Benishore with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.